Welcome to today's program on justice, a lawyer's hangout where lawyers dissect legal issues with intent to create awareness, educate, and enlighten the public. I am Cecilia Meme, a legal practitioner, and joining me on today's program are two lawyers in the legal profession in the person of Mr. Bright Williams and Miss Munirat Adama.
Thank you for
Welcome
having
to
us.
today's program.
for having me.
Today we will be discussing tenants and landlords' rights. With regards to the prevailing issues between landlords and tenants, so today we really want to discuss what rights tenants and landlords should know about. So moving right into the conversation, Ms. Munirat, what laws regulate and govern tenancy in Nigeria?
For each state and each region, they have the tenancy law that guides them. For instance, in Abuja FCT, the Recovery of Premises Act 1919 governs anything about tenancy in FCT. For Lagos, we have the tenancy law of 2011, and that's how it cuts across tenancy law of Ogun State, tenancy law of Abia State, tenancy law of Enugu State, tenancy law of Kogi State, like that, tenancy law of Kano State. That's how it goes from across the whole 36 states of Nigeria.
Okay, so every individual tenant is being bound by the tenancy law governing the state where they are
Their residents,
Their
yes.
residents. Okay, yeah.
Exactly.
Mr. Bright, as a tenant in Nigeria, what rights do I have that I should know about? Because if you look at the landlord and tenants issue, most times there's this perception or there's this claim by tenants not knowing their rights. So, for the purpose of clarity, what rights do tenants have?
Well, thanks for that wonderful question. And I'll start by, before going to the right of tenants, it's good I also enlighten our audience who
Okay.
are tenants.
Okay.
Now, the tenant are people or a person who occupy a particular building.
Okay.
Then they have to pay rent. Then on the other side, any other person that is not a tenant that doesn't pay rent and he built or own the property, the person is assumed or the person to take to be the landlord.
Okay.
So going by the right as stipulated by the various laws in the states, in Abuja we have a Rent Recovery Act of 1990. We have for Lagos, we have a Lagos State Tenancy Law of 2011, just as she have actually mentioned. Then those rights is to the extent that a tenant have a right to his own privacy. That is, the independence of the tenant. A landlord is not expected to invade his or her right.
Okay.
But what the landlord enjoy is what we call right of inspection or right of entry. So they have to check one or two things in the building. Then you also have to a personal peaceful possession of the house.
Okay.
Also have right as not to be chased from the house or have other right as to the extent that the tenant, so long as it doesn't breach any of the terms and conditions of the tenancy or the one provided by law, the landlord is precluded from carrying anything that will affect his or her personal right. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So, for the sake of emphasis, the moment I pay my rent, I am entitled to my privacy.
Yes.
I'm also entitled to peaceful possession. I'm also entitled to not to be chased out of that property
Yes.
illegally or
Illegally, yes.
unlawfully.
And you're also entitled to notices.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Without to
Entitlement to
quit.
notices.
Yes.
Yeah,
Without to
indeed.
quit or increment or whatsoever thing that will have to be done within that premises that you're occupying.
Okay.
You're entitled to notices.
Okay. How about maintaining the property? Is it something that I should do or a tenant should do or should not do?
It comes to depending on what the maintenance is all about.
Okay.
And the agreement you entered into while you're entering into the house with the with the landlord, the owner of the house. So in terms of you altering maintenance, like cleaning the environment, maybe a spoiled toilet and all that, it depends on your agreement. Just depends on your agreement. But when you're going to alter the house, you're going to like remove something or put something, it is very imperative that you let the landlord
No.
know about it. If not, you might not be able to like maybe claim the money you use to do it.
Okay.
Or yes, it's totally at your own doing.
Cost.
Yes,
Okay.
cost.
But in the absence of alteration, I think the tenant should be able to keep the property in good, fair wear and tear.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so this brings us to our next question. As a landlord, Miss Monurat in Nigeria, what rights do landlords have that they should know about?
Okay, first of all, the right to rent. That's one of the first rights that a landlord has. Meaning, when you're packing into the landlord's house or you're going to live inside the landlord house, the first thing the landlord is entitled to from the tenant is rent money for whatever amount you guys agreed on. And then we have right to repossession. Meaning, at any time the landlord wants to repossess his land, as long his house or his premises, as long as he go through the right appropriate procedure that has been channeled out by the tenancy law guiding the resident that you are, he has the full right to repossess his property at any time. There's no matter how long a tenant stays in the house, he does not have the rights to the house as much as the owner of the house, which is the landlord. Then rights to lawful eviction, like I said earlier, when the landlord cannot just take laws into his own hands
Okay.
and do whatever he likes just because he's the owner of the house. He must go through lawful eviction in order for him to evict any tenant in his house, whether tenant at will or a subsisting tenant. And then we'll have right to rent review, meaning that your landlord, the owner of the house, has the right to review his rent at any time he deems fit. So if you cannot deal with how the increase of the rent or whatever, then you have to look for another house that suits you. But you don't have the right to tell the landlord. If the landlord is saying that this is my house, I want it to be 50 million, the worst you can do is that don't collect that house for 50 million. But he has the right,
The right to increase it.
Yes, for the review. Then right to ensure proper use of property. Meaning this one now it goes into is the tenants should maintain the house, yes, but the landlord also should make sure the house is he puts the house in a position where it is well maintained also for the tenant.
For the tenant.
Meaning you cannot rent a house, for example, to a tenant when the roof is leaking. It's totally the duty of the landlord to make sure he does it properly for the tenant to be able to
For the
make it
comfort of the
habitable.
tenant,
Yes,
yes.
habitable. Anything that has to do with a place being habitable, it is the duty of the landlord to be,
Landlord.
and then go both ways also for the tenant to maintain the habitable
State of
premises
the
that was
premises,
given
yeah.
to you when you were packing in. Then right to security deposit. Landlords can require tenants to pay security deposit to cover repairs also.
Okay.
You know, some tenants will complain that they are packing, that the landlord is supposed to be the one to do everything. The landlord can actually come and meet you as a tenant. Okay, there's a security duty, for example, the fence fell. The landlord has the right to come and meet the tenants there. Okay, let's put heads together and do this fence and all that. And then we have a right to access for inspection, like Bright rightly said. Why you have the right to privacy, the landlord also have the right, at least in your tenant agreement, depends on what people agreed on, for the landlord to come and inspect his property from time to time. Not frequently, because some landlord abuse this sometimes, but just at least from time to time. You need something very reasonable, that when a reasonable person hears it, know that, okay, this access is not so unreasonable. Then right to enforce lease and terms, and let me merge it together, right to pursue legal remedies.
Okay.
And that's basically
Okay,
it.
now there's this right you mentioned for landlord that you said right to review rent.
Yes.
That if he wants to increase it to 50 million.
I'm sorry, Madam Cecilia.
But
And most importantly, I'm so sorry. Right to terminate tenancy.
Okay.
Yes, the landlord has the right. Even if you, for example, you pay money today, in 3 months' time, the landlord come, Cecilia, I don't want you in my house again. All he has to do is to refund your money for you and give you like at least 2 to 3 months notice, leave my house. Yes.
So that's if the landlord has need for his property.
Property, yes. At any time, you can withdraw the tenancy as long as they give you due notices.
Do you notice?
Yes.
Okay, there's this thing you mentioned about rent review. Is it the landlord's right to increase rent arbitrarily? Let's say, because I saw that there's a controversy surrounding rent increase. Let's say the tenant is paying 4 million and within the next 1 year you get a notice of increase, and the thing stated there is that you are paying a rent of 12 million, because the landlord owns the property, does it not give him the right to just arbitrarily increase the rent, or he is meant to like notify the tenants, or like prior to that
First
notice,
year.
or there's meant to be like a negotiation or something, or the landlord just has the right because this is property? Because I saw somewhere on social media
Mm.
where someone was saying that the landlord does not have the right to just increase rent without, what's the
Do you want to tell
position
me
of the
something
law
on that before?
Yeah,
on that?
let me just comment on this.
Okay.
Now, generally, the landlord the house belong to him. He's the owner of the property. He can even choose to chase the tenant from the said house. But meanwhile, in doing so, you have to do it with a good mind, like good conscience. Because whatever you
Mm.
do, you should look at the morals, or even if you
Because
put
there's a lot
yourself.
of arbitrary increase of rent
For this,
all over the place
yeah,
right now, and tenants feel like,
yeah, for
no,
this
this
thing
is
in
not
Lagos,
fair.
for example, Lagos Tenancy Law Act, it's stated categorically that landlord cannot increase rent to some certain amounts
Of money.
of money, or cannot increase rent without some certain level of notice to the tenants. So, for example, what they like in Abuja, yeah, there's no that's a recovery of premises of 1990 that is governing Abuja. Yeah, maybe some other states. It's not expressly stated or implied anywhere that the landlord should notify, or the landlord cannot increase to some amount. That's why you see in Abuja, for example, for example, my landlord increased my rent by 200,000 naira, just
that
like that.
that's
But they can't
fair.
do that in Lagos.
Okay.
You can't do that in Lagos. When a rent, for example, is let me give, for example, your rent, for example, you're paying 300 and landlord is adding 200 on it. In Lagos, things are not done like this. There's a certain amount of percentage. Maybe let's say they'll say add 2%, 3%. I might not be privy to the exact amount that is
Yeah.
stipulated in the tenancy law, but in Lagos, you cannot increase rent arbitrarily like that or
So,
without notices. But in Abuja, there's no stipulation. So landlord
okay,
do
so
as they
Mr.
like.
Bright, are we, by what Miss Minerat mentioned, are we going to say that the jurisdiction where the house is located determines if the landlord can arbitrarily increase his rent or not?
Yeah, it depends. Just as you have rightly say, Lagos have placed on certain level of limitation. But from my own research, I discovered that there is no limit
There's
that
no limit.
landlord can increase the rent. But you have to put the human conscience into it. But in doing so, you must make sure that you give the tenant some reasonable notice so that he or she can prepare ahead. Not one they can just wake up and say, okay, I am increasing the rent. They are
Okay.
also human beings.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, okay. This moves me to our next question. Where the rights of the tenants have been affected, what can they do?
Well, when the tenants right are being affected by the landlord, I think the only option that is left for him or her is to seek redress in court. Or and
Okay.
when the rent is still running, you can also ask for refund and damages.
Okay. Let's quickly go on a short break. Let's go on a short break, and when we're right back, we'll continue our conversation on landlords and tenants' rights.
Hello, have you or anyone you know suffered violation or oppression, regardless of cultures, identities, or backgrounds? Leadership Hub, Justice and Economic Advancement is here for you. An organization created with an amplified voice to fight for you and with you. At LJE Nigeria, you will not only be heard, but also provided with legal support. Together, we can create a country where every individual can live without fear of violation or oppression. I am Aisha Shetima, an LJE member. You too can become a member today or report any violation by visiting our website, ljenigeria.org. You can also follow us on all social media platforms for more information and updates. Remember, together, we are stronger.
Welcome back from break. Before we went on break, we're discussing what tenants can do if their rights have been affected. Miss Munirat, moving on to the next question. When the rights of the landlord have been affected, what can the landlord do?
Same thing as a bright side before we went on a break. You seek redress in court. That's the only way. You can't take laws into your hands.
Okay. So, rightly say the court is the only solution.
The only solution.
So those
Apart from the fact
instances
that you
where
settle amicably outside court.
so those instances where the landlord will put down the roof of the house,
That's
break the
very
door,
wrong.
break the
That's very
window.
wrong. It will make the tenant entitled to the damages, a lot of damages.
Okay, to our audience, you've heard if you are the tenant, if you are the landlord, where your rights have been affected in the in, when your tenancy is still pending, you need to go to court. Landlord go to court, tenant go to court. So now there's this misconception that tenants have about this 6 months notice before evacuating a property. What is your legal opinion on that, Mr. Bright?
Thank you. Most time you discover that a lot of people think that the 6 month notice is only meant to be served after the rent have expired. In short, the reason behind the 6 month notice is the rent that has been determined, or is for rent that is a yearly tenants. There are other tenancies that are not even 6 month notice. But for the purpose of these questions, I will tell us that the once your rent is still running, that's the only time you can be issued 6 months notice. But once it has expired or it has been determined, the only notice that is being available is the 7 days owner's intention. After that, you can proceed to court and apply to recover your premises.
Yeah, Miss
Thank you.
Minira, do you want to take a swipe on that?
Like he has rightly said, that is it. So there are misconception that because you're a 1 year tenant, that you must be served 6 month notice is wrong. Once your money has expired, for example, by 12 midnight of the day that your money expired, you become tenant by will or by sufferance, meaning that you are entitled to just 7 days notice to recover possession before you proceed to court. So don't always expect that 6 month notice will work for you.
Okay.
That is when your rent have expired.
That's when your rent has expired. But if your rent has not expired and your landlord wants you to leave, then you are entitled to 6 month notice, even though it's 1 day for your rent to expire.
Okay. Aside the 6 months notices, are there other notices duration really, like that has other duration?
Yes. We have a tenant at will stay in someone's house for free. Person will come to my house and come and stay for free. You're entitled to 1 week notice for you to leave. Or mostly anytime they tell you to move, then you move. Then we have a monthly tenants. They're entitled to 1 week.
No, monthly is a month.
It's monthly,
Month,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then for
Quarterly notice.
it's quarterly. Then for 1 year, 6.
6 months notice. Yes. Okay, so this brings me to the next question. These rights that you both have mentioned, both for the tenant and the landlord, are they always included in the tenancy agreement where there is one?
Can I?
Okay.
Ah,
Yes.
okay.
This.
Most time in the tenancy agreement, carry what we call the what is it called? The rent review clause, or each of those arrangement that carried the agreement that they are
different
part.
rights,
Yes.
okay.
So the right has been entrenched in the tenancy right.
Always, are they always there?
Always. But in the case where they are none or where they are not expressly stated, you can only apply from the one that is expressly provided in the provision of the law. That is the statute.
Okay.
That's the Rent Recovery Act of Abuja and that of Lagos.
Okay, so if in a particular instance, the tenancy agreement is not carrying some of these terms, and me as a tenant, I feel like this is a right that should accrue to me, and then it is being affected, like you said, can we now imply or act outside the tenancy agreement?
You should be very careful when you're signing a tenancy agreement. You should look at it in and out, because mostly your tenancy agreement binds you first before anything. Even the 6 month notice you're entitled to in the law. If you agree in your tenancy agreement that, oh, when it's time for me to leave, just give me 1 month notice and I'm okay by it, the court will bind you by that tenancy agreement, except it's for actions that are so unreasonable or leads to criminality or so, that then you now say, okay, but when it comes to whatever you agreed in your tenancy that you signed and everything, you'll be bounded by that tenancy agreement. That's how important a tenancy agreement is.
Okay, okay, Mr. Bright, do you have any exit recommendations for our viewers?
Yes, from our long discovered that the issue of rent review have to also be addressed by the government, in the sense that they ought to enact a particular law that will govern how and when a particular landlord is supposed to increase your rent in order to make it justifiable based on the current economy. Not when the economy is still the same thing, you see somebody trying to triple or double the rent. To me, the government has to step in order to create a law that will have to harmonize.
Should have a balance
ship-
somewhere.
Yes, between the tenant and
And the landlords. Okay, Miss Munira, do you have
Because
any
it's
exit
becoming an
recommendations?
epidemic now, the way landlords are increasing rents across, I don't know of other states, but across the city
I
capital.
think it's everywhere.
But however, the exit stuff I have is the landlords and the tenants should endeavor to engage the use of professionals, especially lawyers, when they're about to give their property or receive property, so that you be in know of the proper things you should do. And the tenants should be aware that the house of the landlord is the owner, so he can do with it as he so wishes, even though he has to follow some rules. And landlords also should use good conscience in order to deal with their tenants. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to our viewers. Before we leave, final notes. Landlords, please know your rights. Tenants as well, please also know your rights. And whenever you feel that your rights have been affected, please seek redress in court. Do not take laws into your own hands. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks to my colleagues for joining on today's episode.
thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our discourse to our viewers, and remember to follow us on all our social media platforms for more engaging conversations. I remain your host, Cecilia Meme. Bye for now.